Welcome back to Disruption Now podcast. We are once again taping here live from the Digital Futures Lab at their grand reopening. You know, they did this last year, but they're going to do it again. As always, if you're watching this and you like Disruption Now, please like and subscribe. We always need more people to join the disruptive community to empower others and to show that we can make change together. With me today is Ryan Mooney with Green Umbrella, which is an organization here in Cincinnati. Ryan, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to have you here in the building. We work here too.
Yeah, it's good to be here. So tell me, Ryan, a little bit. So we talked a little bit off camera, and you have been passionate about sustainability, the environment since you were a kid.
Yeah, I grew up here in Cincinnati, and anybody else who grew up here knows there's just so much gorgeous natural places here. The creeks full of fossils, huge parks that we can go and explore in, and I think I just always loved being outside and connecting with the natural world. And I think when I was in elementary school, I got involved with my first, environmental advocacy around things like that were the hot environmental issues at the time, like
Sure.
recycling and litter.
Yeah.
We weren't quite talking about climate back then, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, but you got excited then.
Yes.
So a lot has happened in the environmental movement. Lots have changed. It's become, I think, one of the central issues of our time. So that's the good news. Bad news is there's been a lot of challenges because it's the central issues of our time. But take yourself back to being that kid, or it can be at any point in your life through your career. What advice would you give your younger self, knowing all the deep knowledge you have now? And what advice would you ignore?
It's funny because I didn't even realize that I could work in the environmental sector until I got to college and was even a few years in. And so I think I would have whispered to that little person, like, this is something you can do and lean into. And of course, when I was that young, I wasn't yet thinking about careers. But I think at least for my generation, there wasn't an awareness that environmental policy, advocacy, systems change work was a career path. We were thinking about the much more traditional kind of capitalistic, what are the big economic functions in our community. And I wish I had known earlier what the opportunities would become, because I think that would have directed me into maybe slightly different parts of the work. I really love the work that I do, but there are so many ways to connect into the environmental movement.
What advice would you ignore?
Oh man, I think it along the same lines, oh, you want to do good for the world? Well, alternative paths,
You obviously care very deeply about the environment and worry. I'm sure you have a lot of things that keep you up at night in terms of where we're going as a world. It's not even as a nation, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about this problem, how do you paint it as the problem? What if, from a business point of view, I hate to say it this way, but people think this way. When you think about what you do, how would you describe what problem are you solving?
Yeah. I think that fundamentally we are trying to help bridge the gap between how the physical place that people live impacts their health, impacts the community's well-being, and impacts, honestly, our sustainability and resilience as a region and much more beyond that. Because when we look at things like the impacts of climate change, we're not just looking at, distant polar bear extinction or rising sea levels that are going to flood islands. Those are all obviously horrible things, but it's impacting us right here in Cincinnati. And so we're trying to help people understand how environmental quality, how extreme weather events, how infrastructure that's not built for how our climate is changing is really not only impacting them immediately now, we can already see it, but will continue to intensify over the coming decades.
How do you quantify that, particularly with something that how do you quantify it and make it feel impactful?
Yeah.
So one of the things people talk about when you're pitching something, and no matter what, we are pitching something. Even if it's something that's the truth and it's a cause, we are making sure that people understand what we're doing and they're connecting to it. But you have to sell the kind of pain.
Yeah.
And when you sell the pain, you have to also quantify it and what that really means to people.
Yeah.
How do you describe it to people? You kind of talked about it.
Yeah.
Well, specifically, how do you relate this in a way where your average person can understand this is why it should be important to me? Because sometimes it feels as if that's not a problem that either I can solve,
right,
or to your point, it's way off. How do you describe it in a way that's
tangible?
Yeah.
Well, first I listen to hear what they care about, right? Because
yes,
I think that is essential. And so oftentimes we talk about things like how the poor air quality in our community impacts not only physical health, but learning and opportunities. So Cincinnati has literally some of the worst air quality in the country because of our topography. Treatment for their asthma, or they're just really sensitive to these issues. And so when kids are regularly out of school, they're not able to excel academically. They're not able to get the confidence that they need to take those next steps for their lives. And so, it may sound like a stretch in some ways, but talking about how significantly the quality of our environment impacts people's experience and like what they can achieve in their lives is real. And we're trying to raise more awareness about how something that feels disconnected and not my problem
right,
really does become my problem.
Absolutely. But how do you measure success?
Okay, yeah.
So when you're talking, like I agree, that's a way in terms you relate to people by understanding where they're coming from and communicating to them in a way that meets their pain, their experiences. So it's a general, you're definitely creating general awareness for the need to do the work that Green Umbrella is doing.
Yeah. Because our organization is not doing things like installing solar panels, right? Like we don't do that physical work. We are more bringing together partners across government and business and nonprofit and education to help think creatively and innovatively about like what can we do together that will help each of us achieve our goals and tackle these big problems that no one entity can solve. And so we measure success by things like how many local governments have some kind of plan that's guiding them towards more sustainable, more climate-friendly practices. How many businesses are not only implementing ESG goals, but are really like knocking it out of the park and talking about that to their communities. We're also looking at, how many people are we engaging in this work? We have really been paying attention to making sure that folks who have been historically marginalized in the environmental movement are a central piece of mapping the path forward, right? So the people who have had the worst health impacts or live in communities where we see the most overland flooding when it rains, we want to make sure they're a part of the solution. And so we're tracking how we're engaging them, whether they feel comfortable in the spaces that we're helping to create, and what kind of feedback we're getting from them to help tell elected officials and planners and all the people who are going to actually get the funding and do the work to make sure it reflects their priorities.
What's long-term success look like? That sounds like measurable year by year. What does long-term look like?
I hope that in our vision, Greater Cincinnati becomes a place that is resilient and thriving and attracting people from communities that are more vulnerable to climate change. So while we see impacts here, we also know that we're pretty protected from some of the worst impacts, like coastal flooding and wildfires. And so we expect to see a pretty significant population growth here, which could be amazing or it could be challenging. And we want to make sure that this is a community that's welcoming and that is ready to receive those populations in a way that helps us create these dense, thriving places that people love to live and feel safe and have a great quality of health and quality of life.
What do you see as the biggest challenge right now with your area of work?
Well, as you know, climate change is can be a very polarized issue, right? Highly political. And So that makes it challenging. We have to really think about.
Feels like everything is now a highly political thing.
I know, it's
like,
true. It's hard to find one that's
it's hard
not.
to find one.
Yeah.
In some places, reading books is, but I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
Anyway, anyway, go ahead.
So we think very carefully about how we talk to different audiences. And I think that's appropriate. Like, I don't think it's fake. I think we're, like we said earlier, trying to understand what they care about. And
you have to communicate to audiences in a way that they'll receive.
Yeah.
Because it's not fake because you're not communicating if you're not trying to understand the other person's perspective when you communicate.
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
Yeah. And so we are helping local governments, other types of entities understand, like, what are the budget impacts of some of the changes we're predicting?
Right.
We had a year with, I don't know if you recall when there were all these landslides in the city of Cincinnati.
Yes.
Millions of dollars of unexpected costs that the city had to cover because major roads were closed, you know?
Yes.
We want communities to be prepared. And implement these infrastructure improvements. But we want to make sure that we can have those conversations in a way that people will get on board and be receptive. And I think we have a great team that's helping to do that. And we're really expanding our reach. We serve a 10-county region, but have definitely done more work in Cincinnati and Hamilton County, and are really working to create more connections across those rural and suburban communities as well.
All right, a couple of rapid fire questions here.
Yeah.
All right, for you as we get ready to wrap up. Let's say you have a committee of 3 to advise you on Green Umbrella, Ryan Mooney personally. Who are these 3 people and why?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to start with one that's probably super corny.
Okay.
But my husband is number 1. Like,
okay, that's good. That means you have a good marriage. That's not corny.
True.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. No,
You're being like 75% of the population, so go ahead.
He has never worked in a nonprofit. He had really never worked in an office environment at all. He's an artist, really creative guy. But, like, I'll come home and talk to him about something that's, like, really vexing me, and he'll be like, oh, blah, 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 blah. You know? Whoever my board president is, right now it's Todd Palmater, who's the CEO of Great Parks. Used to be Andy Holtzhauser of Donovan Energy. Yep. They have just been such key champions and advocates and coaches for me, and are always on my go-to list of, like, all right, help me break this down into different directions. Now, can I pick somebody who's like, I don't actually know and would be on my dream team?
Pick whoever you want. This is your world right now.
I think the last one is Brenda Mallory, who is with the White House's Council on Environmental Quality. She runs that department. She has had a career in environmental justice, working for amazing organizations, and is obviously now has the national picture of where everything is going. And she would be a great person to tap into as well.
All right, so finish these sentences and then we can do the last part. The future of environment and sustainability is?
Whew. Decarbonization.
Okay. What people within the environmental movement get wrong the most is?
Making it all about what they want.
What people outside of the environmental movement and sustainability misunderstand most often is?
It's not all about endangered species.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show,
Thank you
Ryan.
so much,
It was a pleasure. Learn more about Green Umbrella. This was a great conversation.
Awesome.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.